like thousands to millions of people. So you're directly impacting a larger audience.
Right, so that was very insightful. And now, Pragati, since and you and Yash have said that you don't need to be part of a big company to contribute to open source, maybe Yash could give us some clarity on what the skills required to start contributing to open source are. Looks like Yash might have had a bit of a network issue. Let us just pause for 5 minutes to wait for him to get back. Yes, Yash, did you get that last part, the thing I was saying, or do
Sorry,
you want
I
me to
just
repeat it?
lost connection for a moment. Yeah, could you please repeat the
Yeah,
question?
no problem. Sure. Now, I was just saying, since you and Pragati have elaborated on how it's not really that necessary to be a part of a big company to contribute to open source, maybe you could give us some clarity on what the skills required to start contributing to open source are.
Okay, so yeah, this is a really great question. So to be honest, when you start contributing to open source, even if you don't have any skill at all, it's perfectly fine to just start out with it. The only skill you need is like confidence. That's literally the only skill. You just need to go, like find an organization that you like and start contributing to it. You can develop the skill you need as you work towards greater, bigger problems in the organization. So basically, I'll just give you overall workflow of how this works. So I'll take the example of the most common software hosting platform, which is GitHub. So you go to a repository on GitHub, you go to an organization, you see the repositories, you see something that catches your attention, and you're like, yes, I want to work on this thing. You choose to work on it, then you start learning, you go to the source code, and yeah, you just start to understand how the project works. So the first step is you won't directly start with contributing to code because yeah, that's a bit daunting. You will get to that slowly. The first step is you kind of hunt for simple issues, say some documentation task or some very small bug. So that's how you start out. And while you do this, you will have to learn a bit about Git. So Git is basically a version control system. So these projects are really big. You cannot just, and there are multiple contributors. This is not just you contributing to it. There are people from all around the world working on it, sending pull requests, making changes. The org maintainers themselves keep making changes. So in order to keep track of it, we use a version control system called Git. Git is the most commonly used version control system. So you'll have to learn a bit of Git. That's really the only prerequisite. That also you can basically learn while working itself, which is how I actually did it. So that's how you get started. So you take up a small documentation task or a very small low-level bug. You try to understand how to fix that. You start with that, then you slowly keep on increasing the level of the task you take to solve. So basically, on GitHub, you will see several issues. Issues are basically the kind of problems or not necessarily problems. They can be feature requests, they can be bugs in the software, they can be something as simple as using documentation, like I said. So this is basically an overview of what issues are there on GitHub. You can just choose an issue. You can start working on it. You go from documentation to small bugs to implementing big features in the project. So it's an iterative process basically. And say you take up an issue which you're not able to solve, like you know what to do, but you're not able to get like where exactly in the large code base to make a change. So you'll have maintainers in the project mentors. Like you can, when you take up an issue, you first claim it. Like you just comment on the issue that, hey, I would like to work on this. Then a project mentor or the maintainer will come and they'll tell you that, yeah, sure, go ahead and work on it. And if you face any difficulty and all, you can just like comment again. You can say that, yeah, I have thought about this and I need a bit of help here. I'm not able to figure out how to go about it. But one really important thing to keep in mind here is don't ask questions which are Googleable. Your best friend in anything, whether it is open source or like anything in the world, is Google. Always try to understand what you can do by Googling first. If there's an issue, Google about it. Once you Google and you are sure that, yeah, I'm not able to figure it out, then you comment, you ask, you tell that I have done all this and still I'm not able to figure it out. And yeah, you'll get help. And this is how you slowly keep on increasing the difficulty level of the issues you're working on. And yeah, before you know it, you might actually become an org member itself who has access to help other people who join the open source community.
Thank you, Yash. Now, I would like to ask Pragati that how should a beginner get started with open source?
Yeah, that's a question that almost everyone faces when they're getting started with open source. So, first of all, like I think whosoever is going to start contributing to open source, they should question themselves about what is their end goal out of open source, because these days this is like a very hyped thing, and people are just trying to contribute to open source because other people are, which I don't think is a very legitimate thing to do. So first of all, people should understand like why do they need to contribute to open source, and what is the exact thing they are trying to get out of it. Like also there could be a few questions that people should ask themselves, like how much time can they devote to open source? Are they setting to learn some specific thing, like uh, a person could be specifically interested in Android development. So they should be focused on that particular domain and look for projects in that particular domain. So these are some of the questions that people need to figure out on their own, like what are the things they are actually interested in. And after they have figured out this thing, the initial questions, then they can just one of the simplest things to get started with a project would be, as Yash suggested, you could just simply go on GitHub, search for a particular project that you think is very interesting to you and you would like to contribute to it. You can maybe most of the open source projects have communities around it. Maybe they have a Slack channel or a Discord channel or something like that. So you could just connect to that particular community, talk to people around there, and keep an eye on the issues that are being opening that keep opening up, or the people are opening up. Or you can just do the initial setup, and then look for like you can try on the tool on your own local environment. You might find a particular bug that you can open as an issue, and then start fixing it up. And as you face any problems in doing that, you can reach out to the community again, and people will be eager to help you. So this is one way to do it. Or the other way I started was like I wasn't really sure of like any particular project that I wanted to contribute to. So when you are that confused, there are other ways. Like there are websites available, like first timers only, or up for grabs, good first issue. These are actually websites which actually give you or suggest you issues or bug fixes that are available, which are beginner friendly. So whenever on any open source project, the maintainers open issues, they usually define that this is beginner friendly. So the people who are beginners in open source can pick up that particular issue. So you can make use of these websites for getting your first issue. So one by one, if you are solving these issues, you will gain a certain confidence and also a certain level of understanding of that particular project. So this way also you can navigate inside a particular project or a community, and then further look for opportunities in that particular project. And while contributing, I guess this is a particular thing that people often miss, due to which they face difficulties in contributing to open source. It is like people often neglect the documentation that is existing, or what are the things that the open source maintainers are actually expecting from you. These things could be as minor as like a particular way in which they are expecting you to write the commit messages, etc. So these things are usually available in the open source project itself, in contributing guidelines, and if they have particular docs, etc. So as you are going to contribute, do read these particular documents about that project before you start doing that thing, so that you also make it easy for yourself, and so that you are making effective contributions, and it will be easier for the open source maintainers as well to review and accept your changes. So this will give you a boost of confidence, and also a certain usability of your contribution to the project.
That was a very helpful answer to the most commonly asked question. So moving on from there, maybe Yash, could you give us some insight into what made you start your open source journey? As you guys mentioned, it's something that everyone wants to do nowadays. So, what exactly motivated you to start your journey, and what were some of the challenges that you faced?
Yeah, so basically, like I mentioned before, I was a part of a coding club in my college called AMFOS. So AMFOS stands, so as you can see, FOSS stands for free and open source software. So at AMFOS, our major goal is to contribute to free and open source software. So when I joined college, I like, as most freshers are, I was also curious about what to do. I knew I wanted to do something, but I was not sure what exactly to do. So it was my seniors who kind of guided me here. They told me that, yeah, if you want to work on something, you should choose something which is worth working on. Like a lot of people nowadays kind of like, like I first started out with Android development. I knew a bit of Java from school. I was like in 11th and 12th, I had Java. So I was fine with Java, but I didn't really know what to do with Java. I was like, okay, Java is there. Now, what do I do with it? So my seniors told me there is this thing called Android development, which you can do using Java. And yeah, slowly I learned about Kotlin, and now I also learned about Flutter and stuff. So that's how basically got into open source. I wanted to do something which is like solving a real world problem. I was not interested in doing some kind of a personal project. That was fine for starting. It helped me get concepts. But after that, I want to work on something which people are using, something which will help me give back to the community, something which will help me actually work on stuff that people are using out there. And at that time, I didn't really want to join an organization as an intern or something. I didn't want to kind of say, spend so much time working for an organization. I was like, instead of that, I wanted to open source. I can be a part of an open source community where I can actually help other people as well, because the help my seniors gave me was invaluable. Without it, I would not have been able to do anything. I wanted to ensure that what the help they gave me, I can also help out other people the same way. And yeah, open source at that time, because of this, open source seemed to be the best way for me to go ahead. And that is how I started out. So at that time, I started out, I literally didn't know anything about Android development. Everything I learned was by contributing to the organization itself. So I started out by contributing to this organization called FOSS Asia. So I contributed to the first application I contributed to was an Android app called FlimpMe, which is a photo editing application. And yeah, so that is how I started out. My first issue was, as I mentioned, a documentation issue, and it was really simple. But yeah, that helped me get how the entire environment works. It helped the mentors notice that, yeah, there's a new contributor. I learned that, oh, there is something called Git, which I need to use. And slowly I stepped up my level of the level of the issues I was solving and started implementing features. So that's how I started out. And slowly, like, there have been different projects in the community, but the entire community is one. So I started contributing in say around September 2018, and in January 2019, Fossacia actually developed a new project called Badge Magic. It was a project literally from scratch, and me, along with another contributor, were the people responsible for developing it from scratch. So basically, I became the project maintainer of both of the projects at one time. So that's how open source is. You start from the absolute basics and you get to levels like being the project maintainer itself. You help other contributors to merge their pull requests and review their work. So that's how great it is. You can just start out by knowing absolutely nothing, which is what I did, and rise up to the level of being a project maintainer and help other people out the same way you got help. So that is basically how I started out with open source. In my first year, I didn't actually try for GSoC. I was offered an internship by Force Asia, which I took part in over the summer. So yeah, that my experience with Force Asia was really great. So that's how I started out. They in fact invited me to a conference in Singapore as well. So yeah, open source does give you a lot of opportunities. You just have to be clear about what you're doing and why you're doing it, as Pragati mentioned. You should not just do it because everyone is doing it. You should do it because it matters to you. That's the main thing.
Um, so thank you, Yash, for that amazing experience that you shared with us. Now, I would like to ask Yash again that what is GSoC and what is it all about and how do you apply? And when do the applications open or like the project timeline?
Yeah, so GSoC is basically Google's summer of code. So GSoC has actually changed quite a lot. Like first time I've got to know what GSoC was in 2018 when I joined college, and in 2022 now GSoC is completely different from what it used to be. So I'll just give an overview of how it used to be. So GSoC was till 2021, GSoC was a program to get students exposed to the world of open source, because as I said earlier, most students used to think that the only way to work on something that matters, and get industry level coding experience is by getting an internship at organization. But that's not the only way. Open source is also out there, but it didn't used to be as popular as it is now. So in order to make it more popular, Google made up this program called Google Center of Code, in which several different open source organizations from around the world take part. Organizations ranging from things like the Linux kernel itself to CERN, these kind of organizations take part. They all have open source projects, and yeah, so students can just go to the organizations, choose a project they like, and start contributing to it. So GSoC basically has a time. It's quite a long program. So basically, you need to put in a lot of work before GSoC itself, in my opinion. You cannot just go that thinking that, let's say the deadline for application is March. So you start working towards GSoC on March. Again, you need to know why you're doing GSoC. You need to be working with an organization before GSoC itself. So say you pick up so they can just highlight the differences, because the program is quite different now from what it used to be. So like I said earlier, it was just a 3 month program. There used to be organizations. You select an organization, you work towards it, you write a proposal, you submit it, and wait for the results. Now it is a bit different. So now GSoC has two different kind of projects. One kind of project will be a full 3 month long project with a fixed timeline, and another kind of project will be one which is more flexible. They have basically made the program a lot more flexible now. There are half-length projects and full-length projects. The organizations stay the same, but the stipend will vary a bit. So this is the main difference. And now, not the students, but working professionals from anywhere can take part in GSoC. So these are the main differences. But the way you prepare for GSoC, the way you go about it is basically still the same. So now I'll just talk a bit about that. So if the GSoC deadline is say around March, then they will release the projects by January to mid-February. The selected organizations will be announced by that time. The organizations will give out their projects, so students can actually go through them and they can select what they want to work on. But this is the timeline that Google follows. What actually happens is that the organizations themselves know that they will apply for Google Center of Code. The organizations themselves have to apply first in order to get selected to be a mentoring organization, and then students apply. So there's some organizations which will always be there, like there's the Linux kernel, then Google itself has open source organizations within itself. So all of these organizations are going to be there no matter what. And there are a lot more. You just need to go to the list of organizations and you will see that a lot of organizations are recurring. They'll be there no matter what. And these organizations actually give out their project lists a bit earlier. You might not find it as easily. You'll need to poke around a bit. You'll need to talk to mentors and stuff, but you'll get it. So basically what I did was I started contributing. I tried for GSoC 2020. So that time I was contributing to an organization called the MECOS Initiative and Civics. So what I started doing was I contributed to these organizations from December itself. I didn't wait for them to be officially announced or something. I knew that, yeah, these are good organizations. They are probably going to be there. And even if they are not there in the worst case, no matter what happens, I'll get to learn something. I'll get to be a part of the community. So I was not really that, yeah, if these orgs don't get in, it's time lost. It was just like, it's fine. I'll still get to contribute to it. So yeah, I just started out with it. I talked to the mentors. They told me, yeah, we are planning to take part in GSoC this year. These are our problem statements. And yeah, that's how I went about it. So that's how you should actually do it, in my opinion. So just by December or by the first half of January, choose a particular organization, choose a particular project you like and start contributing to it. Like I said before, just pick up a documentation issue, then slowly keep on increasing the result levels of the issues you do and just work on it. The mentors will notice that, yeah, you are a person working on it. They will themselves come and help you. They will tell you that, yeah, why don't you work on this issue, or why don't you try this approach? If a mentor sees a person really working hard, they themselves will definitely come and they'll help you out the best they can. So that's basically an overview of how to go about GSoC. It's not a one big process where you just write a proposal. It's actually a several months long process in which you talk a lot with the mentors, you establish a personal connection, you get help from them, then you do the official Google work, officially writing a whole proposal, submitting it. But by that time, the mentors know you and they'll themselves help review your proposal and stuff. So once you get in the flow, it's actually an easy thing to do. The groundwork of finding an organization and getting your reputation there is the initial hard work you need to do.
Thank you, Yash. Now that we know what GSoC is and we have an overview of it, I would like to ask you to give us any tips on finding a company in GSoC.
Yeah, so as Pragati also mentioned this earlier, like there are a couple of ways to go about this. If you're a person who's already into coding, like you know what you're looking for. For example, for me, I knew what I was looking for. At that time, I was looking for something to combine my skills in Android development with machine learning, and I found a project exactly in this domain. So for me, I knew what I was hunting for, and I particularly looked for those projects. So that's an easy thing to do. So when you look at the organizations, there is a filter. You can select the domain you want, the tech stack you want, and everything. It's there on the Google Summer of Code project website itself. So that's the simple way. Like if you know what you're looking for, but say you're a beginner, you are not exactly sure what you're looking for, then the best thing to do is follow your interests. You can just see that, yeah, I just think particular thing is interesting. You go to an organization, you see what they're working for, and you see that, yeah, this interests me a lot. Then you go to the projects, you find something that matches again with your interests, you take that up and you start working. It will be hard work. You need to familiarize yourself with something you've not worked with before, but it's worth it. Even if it takes time, it's worth the effort. And just keep in mind while doing GSoC, the end goal is not to get GSoC. GSoC is just a further incentive. The main thing is that you establish yourself within the community, you learn to contribute, and yeah, that's the main thing. So I've seen an example several times. People don't get GSoC, but they have established themselves so well within the community that the community itself will give them an external internship and pay them the same money or even more than GSoC. So GSoC is not the end goal. It's just a stepping stone towards what you want to do. That's why you should know why you want to do open source and not just do it because everyone is doing it. So the other way to hunt, I think Pragati already covered that pretty well. You can just go through good first issues websites. You can pick up good first issues. You can see that, yeah, I find this interesting. And yeah, just try it out. So that method involves a bit of trial and error because you don't know what exactly you're looking for. But over time, you'll get something you really like and you'll enjoy working on.
Thank you, Yash. Before moving forward, does anyone have any questions? You can ask in the chat box or unmute. Yes, somebody has a question. You can unmute.
Hello.
Yes, you're audible.
Yeah, actually, I have just entered college 2 months back in 2021 in BTech CSE stream, and like every beginners, I have also a question to the panel. So actually, I wanted to ask that as someone, as a beginner who is just beginning its engineering life in college life, as someone who's an absolute beginner, who have just known a programming language, say C or C++, and has also done DSA with his effort. But apart from these two things, he does not know other tech domains like machine learning, web development, Android, or anything else like that. So at this stage, by knowing just a language, of course, the basics of Git and GitHub, after knowing this DSA, C++, and Git knowledge, can one contribute in open source, or does he need to extend its knowledge like machine learning and web development? I hope that you got the question.
Yeah, your question is clear. So basically, um, when you start contributing to open source, it's not like you won't need to learn anything. Even a person who knows, say, web development, it's not like it's easy for them. You have to go through a whole new project. You have to learn how they code, the way in which the project is coded, the repository structure, and everything. So even if you do know something already, it does not mean you won't have to do anything else. It's still a long process. But particularly for your question, for your skill set, so what I would suggest personally is don't rush into something. Take time, find out what you like doing, find something that actually interests you, and then pursue it. If you really, really like doing DSA, if you like C, CPP, I would actually suggest you can try out stuff in that domain itself. You can actually try out stuff like ICPC and things. There is no compulsion to do GSoC. You should know what you're aiming for. GSoC is one thing, but it's just one single thing. There are loads of programs out there. And if you're sure you want to do open source and you really, really like algorithms and CCPP, like you mentioned, there are organizations which do that as well. There are several organizations, like there is an organization called Boost CPP. So Boost is a CPP library which has a lot of highly computationally efficient algorithms, and they're always looking to improve this stuff. So that's one organization I know of that people who like DSA and problem solving tend to choose, because it's a really great organization. It's really tough to get into, but it's really great. So again, the main thing here is don't rush into it. If you're sure you want to do open source, if you really like open source, take some time, figure out a project you like, then learn what is needed. Like I said, you don't need a prerequisite. There is no prerequisite as such. You have to work on what you like. You choose a project you like working on, then you learn what is needed to work on that particular project. Because even if you know something before, trust me, you will have to relearn a lot of stuff there, because every org has their own style. They have their own requirements. They expect different things from you. So you'll need to rebuild your knowledge a bit, no matter how much you know beforehand. So yeah, go about it that way. First, think why you want to do it. If you're sure that's what you want to do, then hunt for orgs in the direction. If you are sure you want to do CCPP, I just mentioned one org Boost. There are many like those. And if you are not sure you want to do that, then hunt for organizations based on your interest and start contributing to those.
Yeah, just follow up. As you said that I don't need to rush up. I need to first look at the domains available around me. So can you just suggest me? So first of all, I should answer that I am really interested in open source. As you said that first identify whether you are interested or not. So I am interested in that, but I don't know that after what should I learn next. So can you suggest something which I should learn next in order to achieve the goals?
Yeah, so again, that's something you need to examine yourself. Pragati also mentioned it before. That's something you need to explore yourself. There are lots of fields. You mentioned DSA and problem solving before. That is one field itself. Then there is web development, Android development, desktop app development. Nowadays, Flutter is coming up and Swift. There's a lot of stuff. So I cannot give any particular advice. That is something you need to explore yourself. You need to find out what interests you and work on it.
Yeah,
Okay,
I would
thanks a
just
lot.
like to add, as you already said, that you have just joined college and you're getting started with this thing. So, as Yash said, don't rush yourself into these things. You can just, you have enough time. Even if we consider your BTech journey, you have whole 4 years. You don't have to compete with anyone. I mean, you don't have to rush yourself thinking about that you're lagging behind or something like that. You have enough. You have enough time. You may set goals for yourself if you want. You could give yourself like a month or a 2 months time to try out Android development or something like that. And then, meanwhile, you can just learn the basics and try your hands on few projects. And then you can try contributing to certain open source projects which are built using Android. And I guess this month or 2 months period will give you enough idea if you are interested in that. And then further you can pursue that, or else you can drop that. And meanwhile you learn about something else that you want to try about. You can go on that way. We cannot No one in this world can exactly suggest you what you should do. This is something you have to figure out. So you can just choose this path of trying out things, and then if they work, just continue in that particular direction. And if they don't, you already have enough time to do something else. So you can go this way. I guess this could work for any of the first year students or the people who are still in pre-university phase.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So coming back to the session, I would like to ask Yash that how do you make a project proposal for GSoC, and any tips that you can give us on that?
Yeah, so making a proposal is among the final steps. Like I said before, it's among the final steps of getting GSO. So you will start contributing to the organization, say December or January, and by the time the proposal submission comes, which is generally around March, third week of March or something, by that time you'll already be aware of what the project is. You'll already know that, yeah, this is what this particular file does. This is where I have to make a particular change. And by this time, the project mentors itself, they will have a really good idea of what they expect from GSoC. They'll give you an idea list. You'll search for one idea you like, and you'll start working towards writing a proposal for that. So since you've been working on the project for a long time, you'll know that, yeah, this is where I have to make a change. This is where I have to make new features. This is how I have to arrange folders. If I add a new file, it goes here and stuff like that. That you'll understand only if you have been working on the project for some time before it. That's why I said you need to start contributing beforehand in order to understand all of this. And you cannot just go 1 week before a deadline and say, yes, I want to write a proposal. That won't work out. So since you've been working for a long time, you know that, yeah, this is what all I have to do, and this is what I have to add in the proposal. So that's basically how you go about it. And particularly for the proposal itself, so if for some organizations, they themselves will provide you a particular template you have to follow. Like they'll tell you that we want these stuff, these things mentioned for sure, and any additions you want. And some organizations don't have any such rules. The template is flexible, you can do whatever you want. So the most general template that I know of is, first you start by introduction. So what is the project? Why is it important? And why should, so Google is the one paying for this. So you need to sell the thing. You need to sell why they should sponsor this project. If you say the proposal, your project is introducing XYZ feature. Now, why is this XYZ feature important? How will it help? So that's what you cover up in the introduction. You say, like, you cannot, it doesn't have to be a really long novel. So one misconception is that people think you need to write a 25, 30, 50-page proposal. That's not at all required. Most organizations like short and crisp proposals, like even something as small as 9 to 10 pages, as long as it covers up everything, is enough. So you start with introduction, you cover up why the project, why is it important, then you move on to an objective. So you just give a brief bullet point list that, yeah, I'm going to achieve 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And next, you start describing how you will do each of the points. You just go about that, yeah. So I have to do this. For this, I have to extend this particular module in the project. I have to add some particular code. I have to create a new file. I have to integrate this X part with this part Y, and so on. Just describe how you'll go about it. And then one more important part is the timeline. So this is a thing common in every proposal. Every proposal requires a timeline. So GSoC is spread over a period of June, July, August. So and there will be some evaluations happening. After every evaluation, you'll just get to know whether you're making it further or not. So basically, you describe that, yeah, phase 1 till July, I intend to do all this. You give a week by week breakdown that week 1, I'll work on this. Week 2, I'll work on this. Week 3, I'll work on this. And it's perfectly fine to leave a bit of buffer time. Like everyone does that. I also did my proposal. Like before each phase ended, I mentioned 2 to 3 days of buffer time to cover up any lag, to write unit tests, have documentation and all that stuff. So these are the main components of a proposal. Now, setting your proposal apart. So what most people do is they'll cover up the technical content, but they won't cover up the non-technical part. So what to cover in the non-technical part is stuff like, if a project is kind of already laid down and you're making a new feature on it, then you should include stuff like unit tests, integration tests, and all that. That's an important thing to ensure that nothing existing in the project breaks. If a project is absolutely from scratch, then these things have a lower importance. Then you can discuss with your project mentor, and according to their guidance, you can decide whether or not to go with it. But if it is an established project, you need to include tests, which people tend to skip. So this is one thing which is important. Then the next thing is documentation. Whatever work you do, that has to be documented, because once you work on it, someone else will also come work on it sometime. And when you started working out, you had a documentation, you had something which helped you get started. Similarly, you need to document everything you do. This can be like, this is org dependent. The organization might have separate blogs, they might have the readme, they might have read the docs or whatever. And some organizations just prefer that you comment in the code itself. So that you have to decide based on the way the organization works. So these are two things that will set a proposal apart. Besides this, you can make mockups yourself. So say your project has a new feature for which you need to design a whole new screen, you need to design a whole new module. So people won't generally read each and every word of a proposal, but if you have some kind of a diagram, they will definitely look at it. So make good UI mockups. If you have some UI changes, definitely make good mockups. Have code snippets, show that, yeah, this is what I'm going to do. This is the code. This is exactly the code I'm going to write to achieve this. You don't need to write the entire code for the project. It's a small snippet. Say you are going to make a new API. Just write a skeletal structure. It's basically an algorithm you write. You don't need to write the exact code. just that, yeah, this is the algorithm I'm going to follow, which will work out for sure. And this stuff will help set your project aside. A final thing you can do is, um, for every feature, like not for every feature, for the big features you implement, just make a flowchart diagram. So say I'm a reviewer. I have to review hundreds of proposals students submit. So I may not read everything, but if you make a diagram, you're making a flowchart of, yeah, step one is this, step two is go on to this, then do this, then do this. I'll get that in just 2 3 seconds. I don't need to read through all the theory. So keep it like that. Have diagrams, have UI mockups, have code snippets, include a proper, very organized timeline so people know what you are doing. That if your proposal itself is good, people will know that, yeah, this person knows what to do, and they will definitely give you a chance. So that's basically how you go about it.
Thank you so much for sharing those helpful tips with us. So now that we've completed our GSoC and everything, what is our next step once we've completed GSoC?
Yeah, so this is a question everybody has. Now that I've done GSoC, what to do next? So once you've done GSoC, you are the equivalent of a core contributor. You have spent 3 whole months working on production level features. You know everything about the project, everything, at least everything about the part you worked on. So the next thing to do is, of course, keep working on it. That's a really good thing. Just keep working on it. You don't need to spend as much time as you spent on GSoC. You don't need to spend 5 or 6 hours a day continuously working, but just around the 2 3 contributions a month is good enough. Just keep the project alive, keep it going. That's one thing to do. The next thing is stay alive in the community. So once you're done with GSoC, it's again time for the next GSoC to start. So your GSoC will get over by say September. Then by the next November, December, new contributors will come in. They will want help and so on. So be there in the community, be a part, help these new contributors out, help them like you got help from your old mentors. And yeah, just be there in the community, be there for them. And finally, you can even mentor for GSoC. Just every organization will have some kind of some works, like some process in which they select mentors. Some release a Google form. Some will direct, if you are a GSoC, they directly send you an invite that, yeah, mentor with us, and so on. So just go mentor, help new people, stay involved with the community. Just don't leave your project, because if you leave it, it's not a point. You just did a project, you left it, and now it's no longer alive. Don't do that. Always stay involved with the project. Ensure that you're there as a mentor at least for some time until a new mentor comes in, and then they can take up the project and just keep it going for a long time.
Right, so that was very helpful. And now that we mostly covered everything involving GSoC, maybe we could move on to the MLH Fellowship. So Pragati, maybe we could start with what exactly the MLH Fellowship is and how it can help a student.
Okay, sure. So, MLH Fellowship is also a program quite similar to GSoC. It is also a 3 month long open source program. Actually, the people at MLH Fellowship call it an open source internship. So, it is basically like for 3 months, you contribute to specific open source projects along with the open source maintainers and some mentors from raised.dev, and so that you have a proper guidance along with the time that you're contributing. So it is a combination of your learning opportunity plus your work experience. In MLH Fellowship, we have different tracks that people can contribute to, uh, you can just go to the website and you'll get hold of that they have divided the whole program into three different tracks. One is open source track, one is software engineering, and the third one is product engineering track. Apart from this, earlier they used to have an explorer track, which has now been converted into pre-fellowship program, so as to give an experience of how the fellowship actually looks like, and to prepare the people for the fellowship. They have introduced this pre-fellowship program, which is basically, I guess, a 3 weeks program, which is in which the people get to contribute along with the team uh, to a project. Actually, the project idea is provided by the mentors themselves, and they work on that project collaboratively. And then that project is basically a portfolio level project that you could show off at. In your resume and at different places wherever you are asked for a project. So this is like the very brief overview of what the fellowship looks like, and yeah, I can further explain what are the tracks about and etc. So should I go on?
Right. Yeah, actually, that would be amazing if you could go on, continue and explain the tracks as well.
Okay, sure. So, this is one thing people often get confused with because in other programs like GSoC, etc., the things are quite clear that you have to choose a particular project and submit the proposal for that and continue contributing to it. But the fellowship is structured a bit differently, and people often get confused with what is the right track for them and to which track they should apply to. So, as far as the fellowship is concerned, like I contributed to the open source track both the times I was contributing. So, starting off, like if anyone is an absolute beginner and they have not contributed much to open source or are just new in the domain of development, so they can just go for the pre-fellowship track or the pre-fellowship program. So there they can actually get hold of what the fellowship looks like as the motive of the program suggests. So that is rather simpler and it is much easier to get in. The applications look almost similar. The application process for the pre-fellowship track and for the other tracks. It's just in the interview process will be different for these both the tracks. Then going for open source track, you have to have certain experience in contributing to open source. Like if you you could be asked questions about what were the things that you contributed to in open source in your interviews, and then you have to in the technical interview you have to show certain projects or the contributions that you have done till now. So, open source track is meant for when you are a little bit confident with Git and GitHub and your projects and your skills. So, it is a bit more experienced track. Then, after that, the software engineering track, that is also an intermediate level track in which you are confident about your skills. The major difference between open source and the software engineering track is that in software engineering track you are contributing basically to certain organizations which partner with MLH, Facebook open source or Adobe open source. So you'll be working with the organization and members of that particular organization itself. And in open source you are basically working on the projects from those organizations which are open source. I hope you people are getting the difference. In open source track, you're working on the open source projects of those particular organizations, but in the software engineering track, you're not working on their open source projects, but on certain projects that those organization members will be providing you, and they'll be mentoring you all along the process. Then after that, there is product engineering track, which is quite new, and I'm not sure yet if it is available in India. It was primarily introduced for people in USA. So the product engineering track is more focused on DevOps, so that you could work on projects and learn how to scale them and how to maintain the scalability of those particular projects. So this is like the breakdown of the whole MLH fellowship.
Right. That's quite interesting. And what about the application process and deadlines for each individual track and the entire fellowship as a unit?
Okay. So the application process is rather simpler than other programs like GSoC. Here you don't have to prepare a proposal or go around like selecting the project. It is basically like you apply to an internship. It's mostly like that. You have to fill out an online application form. The form contains the usual information about you, your personal details, and then it has two essay type questions which are basically focused on why do you want to be a part of the MLH fellowship, and you have to submit a particular coding piece that you are particularly proud of, or that you think is an identification of your coding skills. So these two questions in the online application form are the main determinants of whether your application will be selected or not. So my advice to people who are trying to apply to the fellowship would be to focus very much on these two particular answers. I often see that people either fill out these questions very recklessly. They do not concentrate much, or people just actually these questions do not have any certain word limit as of I remember. So people often do things like they write one or two lines that this will be a very good experience working with lots and lots of other people across the globe. So this does not make a proper answer that why you are really interested in the program. I suggest that you should really think about this question elaborately, and similarly write the question so as to convey the same enthusiasm or the passion that you have to participate in the program in those words. And then for the project or the coding section, you basically have to provide a link to a particular file or a particular repo. So it just means you have to select the best project that you have till date, that you're really proud of, and basically if you make it to the technical interview, so the entire 10 or 15-minute discussion that you have in that technical interview, that will be around that project. So the project should also be chosen very carefully, and this will also be helpful later if you're selected into the fellowship in deciding or in choosing the project for you. So this is like the basic application process. As of deadlines in MLH Fellowship, the applications for all the tracks are usually open throughout the year. So in the application itself, it has a certain drop down, as far as I remember, in which you have to choose in which cohort you are interested in. Apart from that, like the application for all the tracks is similar, the questions are all the similar, and deadlines, there are no as such deadlines. But the general suggestion would be that I guess the spring cohort will be upcoming for 2022. I guess that ranges from Jan mid to April mid or something like that. So if the cohort is starting from Jan mid, that means like from Jan start to Jan mid, basically that is the main focus period in which the team will be looking out for applications and reaching out to people for interviews. And one more thing about the fellowship would be that the applications are basically reviewed here on a rolling basis, which means that they keep filling the they do not look at the applications all at once. They keep reviewing the applications and calling people for interviews. So the cohorts keep getting filled like this. So do not wait for a longer time for filling out the applications, or in that case, if you fill out the application in late, you might miss the chance to make it to that particular cohort that you are interested in.
Right. And as you mentioned that we should avoid one-liners while submitting our forms and such, do you have any other tips to improve our applications for MLH?
Yeah, so for these essay type questions that we usually have, like in other internship applications and for the fellowship also, whenever you are asked questions like why do you want to be a part of that particular organization, one suggestion that I usually give is that you should try to make it obvious, like you are very passionate about that particular organization, what they are working for. Once you're able to clarify that to the person who might be reading your application later, I guess that leaves an impact on that particular person that you are genuinely interested, and they can further consider your application. For example, if let's say I want to apply to Adobe. So you could just start by explaining why you like that particular organization, and then you can go on to say that what are your existing skills and how they are relevant to that particular organization. Like if I want to apply to a certain organization that works with React.js, let's say, so I'll just start off by explaining why I'm interested in that particular organization, and then I'll say that I'm really interested in React.js as a technology, and I think that I can make significant contributions to that particular organization or project. This will form a certain section of your answer. Then later you could explain any past experiences that you have in something similar. Like you could say that you have contributed, let's say you are applying to the fellowship, and you can say that you have contributed to other open source programs like the fellowship itself, and you really enjoyed your time contributing to different open source organizations, and hence you want to be a part of the fellowship and explore more open source projects of some bigger organizations or the bigger projects which are used by millions of people, something like that. So do not leave it in one or two lines. Rather make it at least like a good paragraph in which you explain all of these points.
Pragati, thank you so much for your wonderful answers, and even Yash, thank you so much for giving us a really, really good overview about what exactly GSoC is, what are the application process and the tips, and the same for MLH. So thank you so much. So before we continue and perhaps conclude, I'll be going over the form that we circulated and ask a few questions from there. So if it's repeated, I won't be asking the speakers. Others, I'll particularly ask you both. So there's one person who asked, students like me who are in first year and have only done C, C++ and DSA and also Git, but have not completed any tech stack, and they've mentioned web dev, Android, machine learning, and such. Can such students participate in open source? If yes, this much knowledge is sufficient, then what is the procedure for participation? Please mention projects, program names, etc. If no, and this much knowledge is not sufficient, then what should we learn in order to contribute and participate? I think this was very well summarized by both Pragati and Yash, where they mentioned that does not matter what is the knowledge or the skill set that you possess. All you require is to understand what extra you want to learn. So now that this person's mentioned that they know C++, DSA, you can already start contributing to repositories that are about C++ and DSA. And if you do want to learn things like web dev, Android, you can do the same as well. And programs, as we mentioned here, there are two. There is GSoC and MLH. And if the speakers would like to elaborate on any more, they definitely can.
Yeah, I would like to say that GSoC and MLH are rather very big names in open source programs itself. If anyone wants to start out, they can always contribute to smaller open source programs which keep on happening. Like you might have heard of Girl Script Summer of Code and Winter of Code. I guess there are two more. NJAC, Winter of Code, and KWOC, which is, I guess, IIT Kharagpur organizes. So there's also BOSS, which is organized annually by coding blocks, I guess. So these are some of the smaller open source programs which you can always contribute to. Um, MLH and GSoC can be a bit hard to get in if you are a beginner, because you're still getting hold of what open source community and open source organizations or the projects look like. And also this is also a good way to navigate into the open source community, so that when you contribute to these open source programs, you are getting a better understanding of how do things work in open source. If you're not very confident with Git and GitHub, these programs are the ways in which you can kind of they can act as a playground or your practice session for these bigger programs like GSoC and MLH. So you can always go trying out these.
There's
Thank you
another
so much, Pragati.
program.
Sorry, Yash.
Yeah, no problem. So there is another program called the LFX Mentorship Program. That's also a really good program. It is actually hosted by the Linux Foundation, and A lot of Linux umbrella organizations take part in it, and the stipend and all is equivalent, and sometimes depending on the project duration might even be more than GSoC. But again, this is a bit competitive because people who already know the tech stack and are contributing for a long time are the ones who get selected. But if you're an experienced contributor, it's one thing you should look into. And one more thing to add upon is for open source, these programs are just stepping stones. Any program, GSoC, MLH, LFX, everything is just a stepping stone. You don't really need a program. You can just choose an organization you like and start contributing. Like I said before, don't make a program your end goal. You should decide what your end goal is, and it should be something like, yeah, I want to take this organization, I want to take this project from this stage to a much higher stage. I want to increase the user base from, say, a set of 20K or 50K users to around millions of users. Something like that should be the end goal, that is a long-term goal which open source has and a contributor should also have.
Right, so that was a wonderful talk, you guys. So I'll just quickly go through and summarize all of the major points that you guys have made. So first, we had an introduction to open source, which was open source is basically just code that is out in the open for anyone to contribute on public repos or forums. And you can be an absolute beginner and still contribute to open source. Git is also something important for you to learn while contributing. And it's important for contributors to have a proper end goal, to understand why they want to do so and what they want to get out of it. Some good places to start contributing are up for grabs, good first issue. And I think Amoka can continue from there.
Yeah, so I would like to summarize about the GSoC points. So the list of projects that one can contribute to will be released by February, and by this month end, we need to choose a particular organization and start contributing to it if you want to be noticed by the mentors. And to choose a company, we always have to look for those that are in your domain of interest, and keep your project proposal short and crisp, and always document everything you're doing and run unit and integration tests. Write algorithms for the proposal.
Moving on to MLH, we have three major tracks: open source, product engineering, and software engineering. A pre-fellowship program is available. It is 6 weeks long and it runs before MLH, and we can choose to participate in that. And it's much easier to get in there. The requirements are basically two essays, a project, and an interview for MLH. And the interview is based on the project. Smaller open source programs like Girl Script Summer and Winter of Code and KWOC by IIT Kharagpur and the LHX mentorship program by the Linux Foundation are other programs that contributors can look into if they're interested before straight away going for the big fishes, which are GSoC and MLH.
So we have a question in the chat box.
Yeah, so this question is also very commonly asked whenever people are talking about the fellowship. What kind of project must one have to get into MLH? So the project can be like anything. It could be a very basic personal project or side project that you have to a very a project that you have made for a hackathon, or that solves a real world problem. The basic things that you have to keep in mind while submitting the project is that you have to point out your your skills. What are Like if you're submitting a project, a backend project, let's say, so you have to ensure that in that particular project you have followed all the coding standards. If you're making APIs, the APIs are safe to use and they are secure, etc. So you have to just choose a project such that it is a representation of your coding skills, so that you could actually say in the interview that you are a good developer because you have kept in mind all the edge cases or the things that has to be considered for that particular project. And this could be anything actually. As far as I have talked to my peers in the MLH fellowship itself, people have different experiences. Like I submitted a project that was basically a job portal. that we made for the SIH 2020 project. My project was a bit more complex. It was including web development, in which I had the Django APIs, React frontend, and then I had certain machine learning algorithms integrated into it. So this is a bit more complex project, whereas I have met people in my own pod who had just submitted something as simple as a to-do app in something in some new language that they have in some new framework that they have just learned. So the thing is that you have to be absolutely clear about each and everything that you have used in your particular project, because in the case you make it to the technical interview, the point of discussion would be your code that you have submitted, and then they could point out anything about your code, anything from your code, and then you should be able to answer everything about that code. Like for a very basic example, as I said, if you're a backend developer and you're submitting a code in which you have written APIs, make sure that you have secured the APIs, you have followed all the coding standards, you've added comments and things like that, because they can pick up anything like that, that why have you used this particular method, or in for example in Django we have class based methods or function based methods. So they can just ask smaller questions like, why is this particular thing important to do, or what could have been an alternate way, and what are the pros and cons. There are questions like that. So project could be anything. It's just mostly about how confident you are about the code that you have written, and you should be familiar and absolute clear with everything that you have used in the code.
Thank you so much, Pragati. And just one last question before I wrap up. This is also another common question that I see in the form. They've asked a lot about open source terms and especially Git and GitHub, and they've also requested like basically to provide resources where they can enhance their Git and GitHub skills. So could the speakers maybe elaborate a bit on that, on where participants can maybe get started with Git and GitHub?
So the best thing to actually get started is to get started with it. You won't get anything by just reading a blog or reading a documentation or anything. You actually need to do it. You need to experience it in order to get what it is. So the simplest thing is GitHub itself has a set of pretty good resources. Like there is something called the GitHub Classroom or something, if I remember correctly. So they
There
have
are
some,
GitHub Learning Labs, Yash, that we
yeah,
are.
GitHub Learning Labs.
This is actually a suggestion that is made once you make it to the fellowship. That it is
Hmm.
a course that we are made to follow. Even if you are like an expert at Git, they make you follow that particular thing. So it's an
Yeah.
absolute lovely resource to follow if you want to get hold of what is Git and GitHub and how that works.
Yeah, so that's what I'd also recommend. Like when I started the fellowship, we also had to go through the same thing as Pragati
Mhm.
mentioned. So yeah, those are literally the best resources you can get to just get an overview. And like going into advanced Git, yeah, then you need that stuff you can only learn by when you contribute to a project. So just get started with it. If you're hesitating, just ignore it. Get started with the learning labs, get started with the project, and you'll get it. It's nothing tough at all. I know it sounds weird. It sounded weird to me too when I started, but once you get started, you will think that why was I ever scared of it? It's really simple.
I would like to add, like, apart from GitHub Learning Labs, one of the resources that I have identified, which is like absolutely helpful, even if you have like intermediate or expert level knowledge of Git, there are times we often get confused. So in that case, I usually refer to like there's a Git guide from DigitalOcean. So this is absolutely helpful. This also like gives a very brief overview of the common Git commands that we usually use, and a bit of the differences of the confusing things that we might face. It clarifies all of that. So I absolutely love this resource, and I would suggest anyone who wants to get started can go through this, and also couple this with the learning lab. So that could be a very good starting point. Like you also have the resource to read what those particular git commands mean, or how they are working in the background, along with a practical implementation with the help of that GitHub Learning bot in the that GitHub Learning Lab.
Okay, so I think there are no more questions. So now we've come to an end. So we've come to the end of the session, and thank you everyone for attending, and thank you Pragati and Yash for taking out time from your busy schedules and giving us your valuable insights on open source contributions.
And
Thank
also,
you so much
guys,
for having us.
there are links to the ACM and ACM-W socials in the meeting chat. Do check them out and don't hesitate to reach out to us. There's also a feedback form, so please take a minute out to fill that in so we understand where we can improve. And we will now be ending the meeting. So if anyone has any doubts or questions, please direct them to either me or Amoka or any of the other members of the ACM ASEB team, and we'll get them clarified for you. Thank you, everyone, and see you at our future events.